woman deserves her revenge.
Hollywood has started heading down a morally dangerous path recently, and it has to do with its glorification of revenge. Some of the most prominent films of the last 2 decades have used revenge as a positive motive for its main characters. And for many of them, the implicit message is that, well, revenge works. Okay, big deal. Quentin Tarantino likes to show people getting what they deserve. Why is that so dangerous? Well, for thousands of years, Western morality has followed the Judeo-Christian stance on revenge, which for those unfamiliar with the verse in Leviticus, it says, and I'm paraphrasing here, don't do it. But I have a theory as to why revenge is becoming so fashionable in the 21st century. And it's not necessarily good news. So let's jump in, and I'll try not to offend too many film buffs out there. Here's the Mensch Sense take. Now, I know Tarantino is a beloved filmmaker to millions, and I admit he knows how to make beautiful movies. But I have to pick on him because he's probably the biggest proponent of the revenge-driven plot. This theme stretches back to some of his earlier films, but it becomes most obvious starting with Kill Bill, where the opening quote of the entire movie tells us that revenge is a dish best served cold. And Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2 do not fail to deliver on that.
I went on what the movie advertisements refer to as a roaring rampage of revenge.
In Kill Bill's footsteps, Inglourious Basterds and Django also contain revenge elements, whether it's Jewish American soldiers killing Germans or black slaves killing white slave owners. But the revenge thing spreads much further into Hollywood. Taken, The Equalizer, The Punisher, these are some obvious examples, but I mean, think about it. Even Gladiator is a revenge flick.
And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
And we can't forget the biggest action series in recent history, John Wick. It's pretty safe to say that we really root for these characters. We want to see them mercilessly punish their deserving opponents. And here's where we make that awkward jump to the Hebrew Bible, which says, without explanation, do not take revenge and do not bear a grudge. So who's right? God or Maximus Decimus Aurelius and Beatrix Kiddo and John Wick? Well, gosh, when you put it that way, it's a pretty hard call. But to put things in perspective, we need to understand why revenge is considered so morally reprehensible to the Bible. And although it doesn't provide much rationale, plenty of scholars over the centuries have weighed in on the matter. One of the most compelling explanations is that of Maimonides in the 12th century, who said that taking revenge and bearing grudges leads to the collapse of society. Someone offends you, they cut you off in traffic, they might even cause you real financial or personal loss. So you decide to take matters into your own hands. But the tit for tat rarely ever ends there. Pretty soon, you live in a culture of honor killings where I have to murder your brother because your family murdered my cousin. There's also the more personal psychological toll of revenge. As much as these films portray the satisfaction of revenge, there's a common understanding that revenge doesn't really help us to put the past to bed.
You talk about vengeance. Is vengeance gonna bring your son back to you? Or my boy to me?
The night Ben died, I hunted down the man who I thought did it. I wanted him dead. I got what I wanted. It didn't make it better.
The 15th century work, The Paths of the Righteous, explains it beautifully. Taking revenge means stooping to the level of your enemy. The best type of revenge is to be the bigger person. Or to quote the REM song, living well is the best revenge.
The best revenge is living well.
There's no chance of that.
So regardless of how you slice it, revenge hurts everyone. It damages society and the individual. But there's a final, more fundamental explanation, and this one will help to explain exactly why revenge has become so popular recently. I began by saying that the Hebrew Bible is black and white in its approach to revenge. Well, that's not exactly true. There is someone who is allowed and even encouraged to take revenge, and that's God. For he will avenge the blood of his servants, wreak vengeance on his foes. God of revenge, Lord, God of revenge, appear. I will get satisfaction from my foes. I will wreak vengeance on my enemies. It's not that God is being hypocritical, you can't take revenge, but I can. It's more practical than that. At the end of the day, revenge is kind of another word for justice. If you wrong someone, then you deserve some sort of punishment for it. But when a human does it, you run into two problems. First, it's unlikely that you'll have no ulterior motives. You're taking revenge not just out of a sense of pure justice, but more likely because it makes you feel good. And when revenge becomes more out of personal satisfaction than a sense of fairness, it's not much of a moral victory. And furthermore, human revenge is almost never even Steven. Pure justice would say that I get you exactly the same way that you got me. But we're not very good at measuring the infinite variations that would be needed to calculate giving you exactly the same amount of suffering that I received from you. You cut me off, so I cut you off. But maybe I was on the way to work while you were on the way to the hospital. Or maybe you cut me off because you've been abused your whole life and I returned the favor simply because I was in a sour mood. It can be almost impossible to weigh the circumstances of two people equally. And that brings me to my final theory on the state of Hollywood's glorification of revenge. It reflects a moral compass where God is increasingly absent from the modern Western worldview. If there is no God, then there's no fair and righteous judge to carry out vengeance on your behalf. The only alternative is to take matters into your own hands. It boils down to this. I think moviegoers like watching The Equalizer or John Wick deliver justice because it's a replacement for divine justice. We simply have lost faith in cosmic karma, that people will get what they ultimately deserve. So instead, we want to see Uma Thurman slice up some baddies for us. The problem with this is that we don't always see the consequences of a society that permits revenge. True, in the world of John Wick, people regularly give up their life for the sake of revenge, and in other films, it does portray a ruinous obsession with trying to get even. But increasingly, our revenge-driven heroes walk off into the sunset, giving the viewer the impression that revenge is an absolute moral good rather than a social plague based on a godless ideology. It's sometimes really hard to separate the quality of the art from the message that it conveys. Quentin Tarantino might be a master of his craft, capable of bringing out the best in his actors with perfect dialogue and thrilling plot twists. But all of that is simply window dressing for an incredibly pernicious message at the heart of these films. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves that revenge is a dish that might be best not served at all. And that makes some edge sense.